Hi everyone, so I want to get to this story. This is a story that I have been covering right from the very start, and it all started here when Trump said he would withdraw from Syria very soon. This is back in March the 29th last year. It's curious timing, put it this way, that everything happened after Trump just out the blue said he was going to withdraw from Syria, because one of the one of the organisations that I've been following and quoted regularly on the Douma attack in Syria last year is this organisation, the Working Group on Syria Propaganda and Media. And they have released in the last 48 hours a bombshell report that was given to them, they say, by the OPCW, by staff at the OPCW. This report, I will quickly go to the findings so I don't bury the lead. Now remember, this is the Douma attack in Syria that allegedly was chlorine gas, according to the OPCW's report that they filed in October. They said they found chlorine there. It says this, assessment number 32. At this stage, the fact-finding mission engineering sub-team cannot be certain that the cylinders at either location arrived there as a result of being dropped from an aircraft. This is what Theresa May said. This is what Trump said. This is what all the intelligence put forward. This is what the NGOs and the open sources, this is what they said happened. The dimensions, characteristics and appearance of the cylinders and the surrounding scene of the incidents were inconsistent with what would have been expected in the case of either cylinder having been delivered from an aircraft. In such case, the alternative hypothesis produced the only plausible explanation for observation at the scene. The alternative hypothesis was somebody put them there. I'll go into this in depth, like I say. In summary, observations at the scene of the two locations, together with the subsequent analysis, suggest that there is a higher probability that both cylinders were manually placed at those two locations rather than being delivered from an aircraft. Okay, so we're going to go and try and go back to the beginning and just, give you some sort of timeline as to what's happened here so we can, find out exactly where we are and how we got here. Because this is a mess for the government. There is no two ways about it. This is a mess because they're not going to be able to keep a lid on this, and they are silent on it at the moment. I'll go into it in depth at the moment. But here it is. Started in March the 29th, 2018, Trump says US will withdraw from Syria very soon. And then, a month later, there was the Douma chemical attack on the 7th of April 2018. This made no sense. Made absolutely no sense that it was blamed on Assad, and it made no sense to anybody who, had a critical thinking skills, really, because this was at a time when Assad was winning the war against the proxies, the Western-backed proxies, the Western-backed terrorists, rather, that the US, among others, were funding. They were winning the war, so it makes no sense for him to drop a chemical weapon on an enemy when that's the one thing that's going to amalgamate and and bring the forces of the West down upon you. And Rand Paul did an interview at the time with Wolf Blitzer, and I keep referencing this. I'm going to play it again because it really did encapsulate what we were all thinking. Now, he's not my favourite politician, but on foreign policy, he's one of the better in America. It's better than most Democrats, to be quite honest. But just listen to what he said to Wolf Blitzer around about that time.
Well, I think before you talk about sanctions, we ought to talk about, what evidence is there that that Russia was complicit in this attack. In fact, for that matter, I still look at the attack and say, Assad either must be the dumbest dictator on the planet or maybe he didn't do it. I have yet to see evidence that he did do it. The intelligence agencies claim they have that evidence. But think about it. Does it make any sense? He's been winning the war for the last couple of years. The only thing that would galvanize the world to attack Assad directly is a chemical attack. it killed relatively few people compared to what can be killed with traditional bombs, traditional machine guns, traditional tanks. And so you wonder, really, what logic would there be for Assad to be using chemical weapons? So before we get to the Russians, we have to first determine that Syria was implicated, and then really we ought to determine what the connection is between Russia and Syria on this attack.
As you know, not just the U.S., but France and the U.K., they participated in the bombing of these chemical sites in Syria. Are you saying, Senator, the president had bad intelligence?
I don't know. I haven't seen the intelligence. We have a briefing this afternoon where I may see some of this. But the difficulty is these things are not a slam dunk. This was back in 2013, President Obama looked at that chemical attack, and at that point in time, there were his generals saying, hey, it's not a slam dunk. Because you can detect that there were Syrian planes, you can detect that Syrians dropped bombs, but it's sometimes difficult to know whether they bombed an existing depot of weapons, and the rebels have been known to use chemical weapons, or whether the Syrians did it. If the Syrians did it, it gets back to the question, Assad must be the dumbest dictator on the planet to use chemical weapons when he knows from previous evidence it's the only thing that gets the world galvanized to attack him.
That's common sense thinking at the time. Now, it comes from a Republican in America, but it's common sense thinking, and it's what we were all thinking at the time. This makes no sense whatsoever. You know, the people were making memes about Sun Tzu, just when your enemy is about to be defeated. Do something that'll bring the wrath of powers much larger than yours down upon you. It made no sense whatsoever. And then there was Theresa May's rush to judgment on this. I mean, that Rand Paul interview was just after the bombings, but this was just before the bombings. And this was Theresa May and what she said and her rush to judgment, and what she said her intelligence was based upon to actually was the pretext to go on and bomb Syria. And remember, that bombing of Syria, polls at the time were polling somewhere around 20 to 26% approval for that bombing of Syria. The people of the United Kingdom did not want that to go ahead. Jeremy Corbyn even called for restraint, and he was painted as a communist and a commie spy, and red baited because of it, just because he wanted to find out the facts beforehand. This is what Theresa May said at the time.
On Saturday, the 7th of April, up to 75 people, including young children, were killed in a horrific attack in Douma, with as many as 500 further casualties. All indications are that this was a chemical weapons attack. UK medical and scientific experts have analysed open source reports.
Open source reports, remember that.
Images and video footage from the incident, and concluded that the victims were exposed to a toxic chemical. This is corroborated by first-hand accounts from NGOs and aid workers.
And when she says NGOs there, she means non-governmental organisations. Now, there was a big rush to judgment there, and it was before any of the facts came in. And when the facts started coming out, we started seeing, right, okay, this makes no sense at all. First of all, there was the infamous white helmets video, the video that was filmed by the white helmets. Now, I've gone on in further videos. When I drop this as a video on its own, I'll leave a link to them up there in a playlist. This is a video that has been largely discredited. I think everybody now who knows of its existence and knows the facts around it pretty much say that, okay, that is a staged event. There's no doubt about it. They were staged up, especially if you look at the reports from journalists who got there on the scene first, people like Robert Fisk, award-winning journalist Robert Fisk, who said that the children in that video were actually suffering from hypoxia. And this was all of the witnesses at the time and people who were in that video and doctors, etc., were saying, no, it was dust inhalation. The white helmets came in, started throwing water upon them, and basically shouted, gas attack, and everybody panicked. And they filmed it and then went off. Now, as soon as we knew it was the white helmets, there was a big question mark over it, because this is an organisation that has been in. There are serious questions as to its funding and how it was started and why it was started and whose side they're on in Syria. Now, whether it started out as an organisation with good at the heart of it, there's certainly massive questions over that now. So that footage could largely be discredited. The one thing that really couldn't was the OPCW report. Now, although the OPCW report didn't necessarily blame Assad, although technically they could, they decided not to. The evidence that came out, it was pretty much the narrative, the official narrative was, yeah, it's still Assad that did it, even though there were massive questions, of which I'll go on to talk about. There were other reports from reporters at the time. Pearson Sharp of One American News, he covered it on the ground as well. There was compelling evidence that this attack was, or certainly the footage around it was fabricated. There was compelling evidence, and especially if you couple that with Riam Dalati, the BBC Syria, I think he's producer, although don't quote me on that, who made a tweet a couple of months ago that said that he can prove that the Douma footage was staged in that video, that a chemical attack did happen, but everything else around it was theatre. So that's as far as we got. Now, the other analysis of the open sources came from this company. Let me just show them quickly. Bellingcat. Now, I've talked about them a few times. They are extremely dodgy, especially when you look at where they get their funding from and where they get their marching orders from, and especially that guy over there, Elliot Higgins. If I could reach and my hand didn't disappear, I'd probably give him a slap on the screen. Now, I just want to take you down to the last paragraph here. This is Elliot Higgins. While some may find comfort in increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories about what happened in Douma, the OPCW fact-finding mission report continues to make it clear that the Douma attack was yet another chlorine attack delivered by helicopter, using the same type of modified gas cylinders as seen in the previous chlorine attacks. Now, with this latest OPCW report, we can say that if it's true and it's accurate, and this is an official report, then pisses all over that narrative, doesn't it? It's also worth noting as well the treatment by the press of some of the witnesses. Remember, witnesses from that video that the White Helmets produced and distributed around the West and was put out by BBC, etc., as real. There were witnesses, and they went to The Hague, and they testified to say that, no, this wasn't a chemical attack. No attack, no victims, no chemical weapons, they say. There was 18 witnesses that went there. And I just want to remind you of the way our media treated those people who went to The Hague to testify that, no, there wasn't any chemical weapons. Again, this is footage that I keep showing, but it's important to remember just how the media have really pushed this narrative for the government based on really flimsy evidence.
Are you happy to be here?
No comment. No comment, sorry.
Britain is concerned about witness intimidation, misinformation and propaganda distracting from the evidence in Syria. Dozens of chemical weapons attacks have previously been verified there, but this alleged use in Douma is still under investigation. Russia hoped eyewitnesses, including a small child seen in footage from the time, would now end the suggestion that the Assad regime was using illegal weapons and was responsible. How threatened do you have to feel to change your story and to deny a chemical weapons attack? And a question for you, Ambassador, how low do you have to go to bring a little child all the way here and threaten them?
That's how they were treated by our media, based on very flimsy evidence, the flimsiest of flimsy evidence, and a real rush to judgment. Everything was off about this. So let's go to this latest report. So here's the latest report. I'm going to read all of this. In our briefing note on the final report of the OPCW fact-finding mission on the Douma incident, we noted that the fact-finding mission had sought assessments in October 2018 from unidentified engineering experts on the, quote, the trajectory and damage to the cylinders found at locations 2 and 4. The final report provided no explanation for why the fact-finding mission had not sought engineering assessments in April 2018 when the experts could have inspected the sites with cylinders in position rather than 6 months later when inspection of the sites with cylinders in position was no longer possible and the assessments had to rely on images and measurements obtained by others. We raise this as an obvious anomaly. OPC staff members have communicated with the working group. We have learned that an investigation was undertaken by an engineering sub-team of the fact-finding mission, beginning with on-site inspections in April to May 2018, followed by a detailed engineering analysis, including collaboration on computer modelling studies with 2 European universities. The report of this investigation was excluded from the published final report of the fact-finding mission. So this was around back then, but they excluded it from view. It was hidden. It was not published. It was unpublished. It never saw the light of day. And this has been given to the Working Group on Syria Propaganda and Media, they say, by the OPCW or staff at the OPCW. The report of this investigation was excluded from the published final report of the fact-finding mission, which referred only to assessments sought from unidentified, quote, engineering experts commissioned in October 2018 and obtained in December 2018. A copy of the 15-page executive summary of this report with the title Engineering Assessment of the 2 Cylinders Observed at the Douma Incident has been passed to us, and we have posted it here. There is I will put a link below this video to it, and so you can download the report and read it for yourselves. There it is. There's the entire report. We are studying this document and encourage others with relevant expertise to contribute. So this is their commentary on the report. The report is signed by Ian Henderson, who is listed as one of the first P5 level inspection team leaders trained at the OPCW in a report dated 1998. So Ian Henderson has been there for over 20 years. We have confirmed that as the engineering expert on the fact-finding mission, Henderson was assigned to lead the investigation of the cylinders and alleged impact at the sites at locations 2 and 4. We understand that TM in the handwritten annotation denotes team members of the fact-finding mission. In response to an inquiry on 11th of May 2019, the OPCW press office stated that the individual mentioned in the document has never been a member of the fact-finding mission. So the first time they asked the OPCW about their report, they said, we don't know Ian Henderson. And then they, of course, said, well, he's been with you since 1998. This statement is false, obviously. The engineering sub-team could not have been carrying out studies in Douma at locations 2 and 4 and unless they had been notified by OPCW to... Sorry, I'll start that again. We have confirmed that as the engineering expert on the fact-finding mission, Henderson was assigned to lead the investigation of the cylinders and alleged impact at the sites at locations 2 and 4. We understand that TM in the handwritten written annotation denotes team members of the fact-finding mission. That's this handwritten note in the top right. In response to an inquiry on 11th of May, the OPCW press office stated that the individual mentioned in the document has never been a member of the fact-finding mission. This statement is false. We just covered that. The engineering sub-team could not have been carrying out studies at Douma at locations 2 and 4 unless they had been notified by OPCW to the Syrian National Authority, the body that oversees compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention, as fact-finding mission inspectors. It is unlikely that Henderson arrived on a tourist visa, especially to Syria around that time. The OPCW press office also attempted to suggest that the report of the engineering sub-team was not part of the fact-finding mission's investigation. This statement is also false. So that's twice they've lied in response to this. This is sounding more and more and more like a real thing. This is why there's no doubt in my mind that this is real, and I'll cover exactly why as I go on. The sub-team report refers to external collaborators and consultants. We understand that this included 2 European universities. This external collaboration on such a sensitive matter could not have gone ahead unless it had been authorised. Of course not. Otherwise, Henderson would have been dismissed instantly for breach of confidentiality. Of course he would, especially with all the heightened scrutiny around the OPCW at that time, and there were reports in CNN of them being held up, etc., etc. We can therefore be confident that the preparation of the report had received the necessary authorization within the OPCW. What happened after the report was written is another matter, but it hasn't seen the light of day until now, and it was suppressed from the original final report that the OPCW published. What was it, back in October? Or was it in March? I can't remember now. There have been so many lies. This is an important point. This is number 2.1, the methodology, because they originally mentioned this. I won't go into it on detail. I won't, talk about all this. It's very technical, this stuff is. I'll just go over the bullet points down here. But the methodology from the original report that the OPCW was published, I'll show you what I mean. Whenever they publish a report, there are two different methodologies. You come up with two competing hypotheses. You can see they've come here. Hypothesis level 2, 1. Hypothesis location 2, 1. Hypothesis location 2, 2. So they've come up with competing hypotheses, whereas this wasn't on the final OPCW report, as the working group of into Syria media and propaganda asked them, but they never got back to them, I don't think. This one does. If anything, this is more in depth. And there are several anomalies with regards to the canisters that they say were dropped by a helicopter. An impact angle of approximately 20 degrees from the vertical was found to be required for results to bear any resemblance to the deformities of those canisters and what damage they caused. A concrete slab could not have stopped a cylinder falling at such an angle from a height of at least 500 meters. The front of the cylinder showed no sign of interaction with the concrete slab. If the cylinder had been stopped by the steel reinforcing bars, the rebars, this would have left indents on the cylinder, but no such indents were observed. Modelling the impact of a falling cylinder could not reproduce the bending of the rebars to an angle of more than 90 degrees to point away from the impact. This is more consistent with an explosive blast. There were tons of craters around there as well, of the exact the same size. It looks like these are, something that's been shelled. Now, what they're saying is that the cylinders dropped through the holes. Just a pre-existing hole, just by accident dropped through a hole, pre-existing hole. Certainly couldn't have made that hole and ended up, hardly damaged. But the thing is, they couldn't have actually fell through the hole. They couldn't have got through. That's what basically this engineering report, this OPCW report is saying. The results of the modelling studies were summarised with the following sentence, quote, "All the elements listed above point to the conclusion that the alleged impact event or events leading to observed vessel deformation and concrete damage were not compatible. The crisscross pattern on the paintwork of the cylinder body, that's the one I just showed there, I think, that had been attributed by some observers to the cylinder falling through the wire mesh," okay, this is cool, "was inconsistent with the near vertical angle of incidence that would have been required to create the crater." So what they're saying is it can't have gone down flat like that. It would have to have gone down that. And if that cylinder has got fins on them, you know how a dart flies. That's what they're saying. Experts consulted to assess the appearance of the crater took the view that it was more consistent with a blast from a mortar round or rocket artillery than with an impact from a falling object. Similar craters were present in the concrete slabs on top of nearby buildings. They're basically saying that, yeah, it was something that had been shelled. And here we come down to the results. The analysis of location 4, where a cylinder was found on a bed, showed that the cylinder was with intact valve and fins attached, could not have fitted through the hole in the roof. It was not possible to establish a set of circumstances where the post-deformation cylinder could fit through the crater with the valve still intact, whether or not an end cap was assumed to have been fitted in the front end of a cylinder, and the fins deformed in the manner observed. These are the conclusions that they came to. In summary, the analysis at location 4 showed simply that the cylinder with fins and valve attached could not have fitted through the hole. The analysis at location 2, using finite element analysis and computer simulation, was more complicated. This showed that the concrete slab could not have stopped the cylinder, that if the cylinder had been stopped by the rebars, there would have been indents on the cylinder, and that an impact could not have bent the rebars through more than 90 degrees to point away from the impact location. We note that several of the anomalies reported by the engineering assessment have been identified independently from open source images by members of the working group. These include the inability to fit the cylinder through the hole at location 4, the presence of similar craters on nearby buildings at location 2, and the incompatibility of the crisscross pattern on the paintwork of the cylinder when falling through the wire mesh. The results from both locations are summarised in paragraph 32. Again, they're quoting from the report itself. The dimensions, characteristics and appearance of the cylinders and the surrounding scene of the incidents were inconsistent to what would have been expected in the case of either cylinder being delivered from an aircraft. In each case, the alternative hypothesis produced the only plausible explanation for observations at the scene, and the alternative hypothesis was they were placed there. These are the implications that the group came to. This is really serious. This has to be addressed. This cannot be swept under the rug. We cannot let them sweep this under the rug. This has to be addressed. And the fact that they haven't come out and screamed and shouted and said that this is false yet tells you that things are going on beyond the screen. I'll get to that in a minute. The conclusion of the engineered assessment is unequivocal. The alternative hypothesis that the cylinders were manually placed in position is, quote, the only plausible explanation for observations at the scene. That's beyond doubt. The only plausible explanation. In our last briefing note, listed 2 other key findings. It is no longer seriously disputed that the hospital scene was staged. There are multiple eyewitness reports supported by video evidence. I've covered a lot of the evidence that says this was a staged scene at that hospital, at the Douma hospital. Honestly nobody, I believe, who has seen all the evidence can take that video with any credibility at all. And the fact that the government still are is honestly laughable. It also says the case fatality rate of 100% with no attempt by the victims to escape is unlike any recorded chlorine attack. This is the other thing as well. 35 people died. Well, I think they kept saying 70, but it's 35 people. There were no survivors. They said that those people in the video were survivors, but that wasn't, as we've seen, that wasn't from a chlorine attack. It was from dust, it was from hypoxia. But a 100% mortality rate, no signs of people running away. I've seen the pictures. I looked at them, so you didn't have to. They're horrible. Taken together, these findings establish beyond reasonable doubt that the alleged chemical attack in Douma on the 7th of April 2018 was staged. This is an event which led to 3 countries bombing Syria. Bombing it. Pretty much the only people who win out of this, whole thing, are the weapons companies, a Raytheon, a Boeing. They're the only people who win. Their shares went through the roof. They go on to say, Working Group of Syrian Propaganda and Media, they go on to say this. This raises the question of where and how did the 35 victims seen in the images recorded at location 2 die. There's 35 at location 2, so that means they must have said there were 40 or around about 40 at location 4. The images show signs of acute inhalation injury with blood and mucus flowing from the nose and mouth of most victims, even though faces had apparently been washed to remove most of the mucus. Yellow staining of the skin remained. I won't read the rest of that. I will lead a link below. What they're saying is there were 2 other incidents that happened, and there's a hypothesis that these people were taken there from another area where they were gassed intentionally, which makes no sense if Assad did it, because if Assad did it and they moved them there, why didn't they just film it at the other location? Why fabricate it? Just want to come to their conclusion here. We conclude that the staging of the Douma incident entailed mass murder of at least 35 civilians and to provide the bodies at location 2. It follows from this that people dressed as white helmets and endorsed by the leadership of that organisation had a role in this murder. We note that the Douma incident was the first alleged chemical attack in Syria where OPCW investigators were able to carry out an unimpeded on-site inspection. Since the 2014 OPCW's fact-finding missions investigated alleged chemical attacks in opposition-held territory have relied for evidence on witnesses and materials collected by opposition-linked NGOs of doubtful provenance, including the CBRN Task Force, the Chemical Violations Documentation Centre Syria, and the White Helmets. Even for the investigation of the Ghouta incident in 2013, the OPCW World Health Organization mission was able to visit the alleged attack site for only a few hours and was under the close supervision of the armed opposition. For those who will now have been prepared to accept the findings of the OPCW fact-finding mission, that did not include on-site inspections. The finding that the Douma incident was staged based on careful on-site inspection should cast doubt on the findings of these earlier missions. I want to get to this as well. This is something else that's important, because the OPCW are up to their neck in this. How can we trust them if they've suppressed a report that shits all over the official narrative that the government have given, that Trump has given, that May's given, Macron gave? In our last briefing note, we concluded that by asserting that, quote, it is doubtful whether OPCW's reputation as an impartial monitor of compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention can be restored without radical reform of its governance and working practices. The new information we have removes all doubt that the organisation has been hijacked at the top by France, the United Kingdom and the United States. We have no doubt that most OPCW staff continue to do their jobs professionally, and that some who are uneasy about the direction that the organisation has taken nevertheless wish to protect its reputation. However, what is at stake here is more than the reputation of the organisation. The staged incident in Douma provoked a missile attack by the United States, United Kingdom and France on the 14th of April 2018 that could have led to all-out war. Syria is a close ally of Russia. It could have led to war. The cover-up of evidence that the Douma incident was staged is not merely misconduct, as the staging of the Douma incident entailed mass murder of civilians. Those in OPCW who have suppressed the evidence of staging are unwittingly or otherwise colluding with mass murder. We think that in most jurisdictions, the legal duty to disclose the cover-up of such a crime would override any confidentiality agreement with an employer. OPCW employees have to sign a strict confidentiality agreement and face instant dismissal and loss of pension rights if they breach this agreement. We would welcome any initiative to set up a legal defence fund for OPCW staff members who come forward quicker publicly as whistleblowers. So, the OPCW looks like they've lied about this report twice, trying to, cast doubt upon it. No doubt that they will now smear this Ian Henderson chap. Sorry about that, Ian. Looks like your life's going to get a little bit busier, because, yeah, they're probably going to smear you rather than actually say that this report is legitimate. They also lied about this not being a part of the fact-finding mission investigation. Obviously it was. He was on the ground there. He's not going to be a tourist, and especially he's not going to be a tourist who's got access to 2 universities and all sorts of, research laboratories that he's sending stuff backwards and forwards to. It's collaborating with them. It's obvious he was on the ground there with the OPCW mission. So they are lying to cover it up. Again. How many more things are they lying about? Because if this report is actually factually true, first of all, we can't trust anything that the OPCW has said ever. Certainly not with regards to Syria and chemical weapons. They're meant to be the people that we go to for the truth. And now we find out that they've been hijacked too. Allegedly. What I find most curious about this, and I really do find it curious, and what should with you anyway, it certainly does with me, and confirms it even more that I have been right on this Syria attack all along. Not for the first time, again, by the way, in the last year since I started this channel. And the mainstream media being totally wrong. But not only am I right again, but this is the reason why that guy, who is usually the mouthiest of mouthy gits you can possibly imagine, he's shut his pie hole. He's hardly saying anything. And obviously this shits all over the Bellingcat report, which Theresa May used as that's what she used to go and bomb Syria. That was the pretext. The implications of this are obviously the OPCW. You've got to call into question every report that they've ever done. But the government has either, at best, took advantage of a horrific incident to manufacture a pretext to bomb Assad. That's best case scenario, I think, here now. Worst case scenario is they're complicit in the mass murder of at least 35 civilians to create a pretext to go to war. I would also like to point out that the media, the mainstream media, have been complicit in it all. Despite the fact that we have been screaming in independent media, it's totally dodgy, this is dodgy, look into it, look into Bellingcat, these NGOs, they will not listen. They are stenographers to power, but they are their public relations. No doubt they'll get ahead of this in the next day or two and they'll all get on the same page and they'll do their damage limitation like they always do. But this is bullshit. It's pretty obvious here, this is bullshit. Unless by some aberration this whole report is false. And I can't see that happening. I really can't. Especially with regards to their silence, like I said, and his silence. Because if this report wasn't factual, if this report wasn't from Ian Henderson, and if this report wasn't from the OPCW, and if they didn't suppress it, like looks like they have, that guy would be jumping up and down, dancing, going, ha 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 ha, caught you, because he's a mouthy bastard and he can't keep his mouth shut. This guy who's funded by the government, by the way, he says he's not, but he is, indirectly through the Atlantic Council. We can never trust the government's word again. Not that we could before, but especially with regards to any pretext to go to war. We can't. We need hard evidence. We can't trust it again. They're lying to us, pretty obviously here. They're lying to us. Just remember, this is the BBC. Rushing to judgment saying it was chlorine gas when the preliminary report came out. They had to change it. Syria war possible chlorine at Douma. They had to change that false title. Pushing the government narrative. You tell me that the BBC aren't involved in this. You tell me that the BBC didn't know this was bullshit and they were desperately trying to push the government narrative, or they were buckling to government pressure to push this narrative. Either way, I don't give a fuck. You're stealing £154, £50 every household in this country. You do not get to propagandise and fucking lie to those people for the privilege. My favourite writer summed this up best, I think, Caitlin Johnson. I'm going to end this video on this because I'm really starting to get angry. We are being lied to about Syria. Anyone who believes unproven assertions about governments targeted for toppling by the US centralized empire has failed to learn the lessons of history. The Syrian government had literally nothing to gain strategically from using chemical weapons in Douma, a battle it had already won, and knew full well that doing so would provoke an attack from the empire. Douma was occupied by the Al-Qaeda-linked Jaish al-Islam, who had at that point nothing to lose and everything to gain by staging a false flag attack in a last-ditch attempt to get NATO powers to function as its air force. If you still believe at this point that the Syrian government dropped poison gas on Douma last year, then I've got some Iraqi weapons of mass destruction to sell you. Well said, as always, Caitlin Johnson. We are being lied to about Syria. We are being lied to about the Douma attack. Right now, their silence is lying. Their silence is lying. This is out there. This is in the public domain, and they're fucking silent on it. The media, entire, silent on it. You want to prove to me, media, that you're not co-opted by the government and you're not the public relations of the fucking establishment in this country? Then do your fucking job and start reporting on this. Why is it that a guy sitting in his council flat can fucking do it on less than £1,000 a month and you bastards can't? Why can't you grow a backbone, any of you motherfuckers? What is the matter with you? What is the matter with you? Why can't you grow a fucking backbone? This is not difficult to work out. It really is not. You don't have to be a fucking genius to figure out what is going on here. You just have to look back in history at what's happened every single fucking time, because it's happening right now. They are building a pretext to go to war based on fucking lies. Who do you think is going to pay for it? Who? You think they're going to pay for it? Are they fuck? They're going to make you pay for it. Right now, they're off the coast of Iran, right now, blocking tankers, blocking oil exports by Iran. Exactly the same thing that fucking Churchill did them in 1953 that started this fucking mess in the first place. Right now in Iran, they're doing it. What false flag is going to fucking happen over there to start World War III, eh? What lies are we going to be told about that? Is this why you're rushing now? Because all this fucking information is coming out and you don't want it to reach the public before you get to drop the bombs? Because your fucking Ponzi scheme that is Wall Street will lose some money? What is the fucking matter with you? None of you have got a backbone in your body. None of you reporters out there. There are probably 2, maybe 3 mainstream reporters who have covered this well. There's one lady in the Garden, I cannot remember her name, I'm sorry, and Peter Higgins and one other. And that's it, mainstream-wise, that's it. Their silence is deafening. The Fourth Estate is dead. Support independent media.